It is the unofficial beginning of the SEC football season, SEC Media Days, and we got Will Gunter on the line, 107.5, the early game. Will, how we doing today?
Doing good, feeling great. You know, you're starting to get back into rhythm here and be able to experience a college football off season where we're not discussing whether or not the season will happen, but actually what the good games will be and what the quarterback battles will be or what the starting left tackle might be. It's a lot more fun than where we sat a year ago when the debate was about whether to or whether not to play. So I can't complain at all.
Now, Will, I went to 6 or 7 consecutive SEC Media Days. You've racked up quite a few of these yourself, but didn't make the trip this year.
No, they've still got some protocols in place and things of that nature. And obviously in Birmingham, I would have been doing a 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. show, and then with Shane Beamer going at 4 o'clock today, it's our show. I like going, I like being there and being a part of it. But certainly with everything that takes place when you do an early morning show, you don't really get the interviews like you typically do. And I think they were going to be a little bit more limited this year in terms of taking people down Radio Row. So we sent another guy. I think next year it's in next year. They actually have not announced where it will be next year. Now I will admit it was supposed to be in Nashville. It was supposed to be in Nashville this year, and had it actually been in Nashville, that might have been a totally different story. I might have had to find a way to make sure I was there for that, given what I like about that town. But yeah, I expect to be back next year and for everything to be full go.
So the decision doesn't necessarily have everything to do with journalistic integrity and reasons.
Well, and I got to admit, I bought a boat, and it was nice this weekend, and I have to worry about driving to Birmingham, Alabama, and instead be out on the boat and enjoy lake life. So there was some positives to it that it might not have been hard to twist my arm about not going this year.
And it's 2021. You can get anything you want online.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Shane's been a lot more accommodating with the media than Will Muschamp was, and if we wanted to have Shane on our show, that would not be a problem. And honestly, he's going to bring back I wouldn't say a tradition, but Lou Holtz did it, and then Steve Spurrier did it. Will Muschamp was not a golfer, so he never had a media golf outing. But Shane Beamer not this Thursday, but the following Thursday, will have what they're calling Birdies with Beamer, where he'll have his own kind of little media event that I'll actually play in and go out there and we'll spend some time to get more of a local interview session with him. So Shane's been great. He's been great to deal with and opening up the program to people that want to talk about it and trying to promote it. He did it again today, obviously, but you don't have to make the 5.5 hour trip to Birmingham.
Up until today, the most I'd seen of Shane Beamer was a 15-second clip here, 30 seconds there. This is the first time I had a chance to see him at the podium. Obviously, it's not necessarily a relaxed situation, but he did come across as a very real, authentic guy. He wasn't afraid to reference his father and shy away. A lot of people would try to separate themselves and, try to stake that claim to I'm my own man. I'm not going to rest on that legacy. And he seemed to be very comfortable with referencing his father where he needed to and his connection to the SEC and what he learned from his father. And he sold me in regards to his investment in South Carolina football, his respect for the tradition, his respect for the people there, and where he sees it going and the lofty goals that he has.
Well, a couple things about that. One, while Shane grew up in Blacksburg, where Frank was the coach, Shane is originally from Charleston, South Carolina. He views this as his home state. And although he played at Virginia Tech, and we all know the relationship that his father has with that university, this has always kind of been a dream job for him. He's always wanted to come back here and be in the SEC. So that's number one. Number two, and this is kind of an interesting point. I'm 39 years old. I've grown up here. I've been a fan. Obviously, I do what I do now. When Shane Beamer was here, was kind of the pinnacle of South Carolina's success. Is when they were reaching. Shane hadn't been around for 2-8 and 4-8 and 1-10 and 0-11, and for some of the more lean years where you were getting your brains kicked in, and so he's seen success here. It's kind of honestly. That's all he knows. And that's a little bit different kind of than a lot of coaches that have come through here, where when Shane's been here, there was success. He saw how to do it. And you see that enthusiasm, you see that belief, you see it kind of bubble over today. Certainly he's a guy who you look at his pedigree, whether it's Sylvester Croom or Philip Fulmer, guys that he coached under as graduate assistants. We know Steve Spurrier here, Kirby Smart, Frank Beamer, Lincoln Riley. There's a lot of people that Shane has gone through in the past that he can kind of pick and choose what he likes from each program to utilize it for what is now his program. And so obviously, again, seeing the success that he had here previously, you see the enthusiasm he has for the job and the belief that he can win big here.
Got Will Gunter on the line from the all-new early game, 107.5 The Game, right there in Columbia, South Carolina, talking Gamecocks football in the SEC with us on a regular basis. We always appreciate Will stopping by. Yeah, Shane Beamer, I got to tell you, the only question I remember hearing from him that I thought, not necessarily that he dodged, but somebody wanted to pin him down more on what the expectations are, what's going to be a good season, what are the goals, and he stuck to the in a podium speech that was very non-coach speak. And when it was, he actually pointed it out and said, this is going to be coach speak, but this is just the way it is. That was the one time that he said, we're just going to get better every day. He didn't want to say we want to go to a bowl game or we want to do this or we want to do that. It was more about just, hey, the process. We got to go to work. We got to get better. I got to see a better football team at the end of August that I saw at the beginning of August. Just those sorts of things.
Yeah, honestly, I thought that was his best answer of the day. We discussed that on the morning show today because it's interesting. You go back, and when Steve Spurrier came into South Carolina in 2005, he was known, as for everything he had done at Florida and the success they had had. And Steve Spurrier went to media day in 2005 and said, "Look, we're just trying to go to a bowl game this year. We hope one day we can go to Atlanta, but for 2005." We're just trying to go to a bowl game. And then you had Will Muschamp come in following that. And Muschamp would say constantly that he was the coach of a 4-18, or a 3-9 back then, 3-9 and going into 2016. But he would kind of set the expectations. And there's a lot of excitement, obviously. Shane has brought a lot of enthusiasm, a passion for the job. And what it's done that's fun to watch is it's reinvigorated the fan base. This is a fan base, Mark, that's beaten down. I mean, they're 6-16 over the last 2 years. It really started 3 years ago with a 28-0 shutout loss in the Belk Bowl to Virginia. There was an ugly loss to North Carolina. Last year was ugly all the way around. The end of the season, you had guys opting out. You were getting blown out of the water by Kentucky and Georgia. This fan base is beaten down, and it's as bad as I've seen it in 20 years, where they need a little TLC right now, and Shane has been able to provide that. But at the same time, you've got to keep expectations realistic for this coming year, and the expectations are to just try and get to a bowl game. So I like that answer from him today, because you can't go out there and start painting this huge picture of grandeur and talking about how great you're going to be off the bat, and hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. People hold you to those expectations, and South Carolina's not ready to do that right now. They're in a good place. They're not as bad as 2-8 looks, but they're also not on the same footing as some of the main teams that they've got to go against: Georgia, Florida, Texas A&M, Clemson, obviously as well. So you've got to find a way. You've got to find that balance of promoting a positive environment and promoting a program that's going to move in the right direction, but also keeping expectations at bay, where if you go 7-6 this year, people aren't getting too upset with you.
Please like the videos, folks. Share the videos out on social media. Get more people involved in SEC football talk here at the Voice of College Football. We got Will Gunter on the line, been joining us for a long, long time. Always enjoy having Will on. You can join him on 107.5 The Early Game, the all-new Early Game. They're on 107.5 The Game, Columbia, South Carolina. So from Shane Beamer, we almost go to the opposite end of the spectrum, because I think a lot of people forget or don't know that actually Dan Mullen's got just about as much tenure in this league as Nick Saban does between Mississippi State and Florida. And it was just the strangest season, I think, in college football last year, because he accomplished so much in beating Georgia head-to-head, getting past them in the division, giving Alabama such a great game in the SEC championship game. When you put at the Alabama standard and what they were last year, which was a completely dominant team, and you look at what Florida was able to hang with them, that was all the pluses. Those were all the pluses. And then on the negative side, you got the Missouri fiasco, in which he didn't necessarily help uh, uh, a fight at midfield, and the comments after the Texas A&M game that the crowd was too loud in a late field goal loss, and then of course the LSU shoe throw and the upset loss, and then it kind of all exploded with just the showing against Oklahoma, which people understood that they were shorthanded, but you go, you show up, you fight, you do what you can to try to win the game or stay close, not just give up and throw up your hands. So that in mind, I know that I'm not there in Gainesville every day, Will, to hear the media back and forth and the exchanges with Dan Mullen, but I would just think that we would have heard a little bit more about that today, and Dan Mullen having to answer for some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it was a quirky year. I've always been of the belief that, and I still am, that Dan Mullen is the second best coach in the SEC. Did we see more of his personality last year than we had ever seen when he was in Starkville? Yeah, and the reason being is Florida is a bigger job than Mississippi State, and if you're 8-2 or 7-3, you get more publicity in Gainesville than you do in Starkville. What he did in Starkville is an extremely difficult job, and he did a phenomenal job. And I think in terms of X's and O's, he's as good as a coach as there is outside of Nick Saban in this league. Now he does have a history of having a bad loss. If you go back and you look at his tenure at Mississippi State, he would typically beat somebody maybe he was not supposed to beat. He would typically lose in a season to somebody he wasn't necessarily supposed to lose to. But I think he's a great X's and O's coach. What we saw last year was personality. But you know what, Mark? There was a lot of us, a lot of people out there can relate to it, whether you were cooped up in the house or you were stuck around your kids or your family or maybe your significant other for an extended period of time. Maybe you got a little wacky too. Maybe you did a few things that you don't typically do during the season, and you showed a little bit of personality. Dan Mullen did that. I don't want to defend him necessarily because you are the head coach of a multi-million-dollar organization and you've got to treat it as such. But, I don't really blame him sometimes. I think he's a wacky character. Today, he's there wearing, I'm not a shoe guy, but whatever Jordans he was wearing there today, that's a little thing. That's a little stick he's got that he does. He is kind of a funny character, and you don't see that when a coach is in Starkville. When they're in Gainesville and they're in that fishbowl and they're in that limelight and you're in a program like Florida, yeah, you're going to see that personality a little bit more. And he showed it. We'll see how he does. I was interested to hear him talk about Emory Jones today. He's got to replace, obviously, a lot of talent, but talking about what he's got coming back and the number of snaps that they played and how comfortable he felt with his program at this point, I thought was very interesting.
And he's got to defend the defense. They were not up to Florida Stanford standards last year. And what can he say at this point? They can't go out there and prove anything in the middle of July. But at this point, he just goes out and says, I love the enthusiasm. I love the attitude coming off some disappointments on the field, that they're trying to clean things up. They're trying to do the right things, get in the weight room, be better players, learn the assignments. He said all those things about the defense.
Yeah, I mean, Todd Grantham is certainly a guy who's been around the league for a while, has been in Georgia. Now obviously down in Florida, and is a well-respected defensive coordinator. I do think it's a make or break year for Todd Grantham down there. Count me in the number of people who was maybe surprised that you didn't see a change in defensive coordinator. But again, when you win the SEC East, and he pointed that out today, he made sure to just kind of remind everybody, hey, it was us who won the East, not Georgia. Not sure if y'all remember that, but it was Florida. Maybe you don't make that change. And I'll be interested because South Carolina's got a connection there right now. They went and got Torian Gray, who is the defensive backs coach at Florida. And Gray has already been able to do a pretty solid job on the recruiting trail and kind of make a statement there. But it will be interesting to see that defense for Florida. And you look at the schedule, obviously hosting Alabama is going to be a lot of fun. I think that's September 18th. I look at it. They've got to come to South Carolina on November 6th, which is the week after the cocktail party. So they have a schedule in front of them that's not necessarily the easiest one in the league. But Emory Jones, the crazy part of talking season as we're going through, I've seen him projected as a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. How does he perform this year? It's hard to argue with Dan Mullen's history with quarterbacks and then the talent that Emory Jones already has.
I think more so than any other team in the league, I've seen a greater dispersity of where people think Florida's going to land. I think everybody else with every other team is pretty much set on, this is a 500 team, this is a championship team, this is a whatever. But with Florida, I think a lot of people think that they're going to continue on. This Dan Mullen's got them improving every year, and other people think, hey, they lost all that offense. Look at how they fell apart last year. Look at that schedule. Man, this is 7-5.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you see that. Again, the schedule is what it is, and you do get Alabama and LSU. You got to go to LSU, and I know we'll talk about them in a minute with Ed Orgeron and what we're trying to figure out about LSU. But I mean, you look at that again. If you look at Dan Mullen's history, he's going to win probably a game that's going to surprise you. Maybe it is the Alabama game. Maybe it is Alabama in the swamp, and Bryce Young's not necessarily ready for what Dan Mullen wants to do. I mean, again, look at what he put up on him last year, and I think the guy that you watch with Florida this year that takes over is Justin Shorter, the transfer from Penn State. I think that's a guy that can make an instant impact for them. They've got some other weapons, obviously, as well. I know when you lose Trask and you lose Tony and you lose Pitts, you go, oh, that offense is going to fall off. Maybe it's not on that level, but I don't expect it to take a huge step backwards. So he'll win one of those, and then he'll probably lose one. Maybe he loses. What is it? I think they go to Missouri, and I like Eli Drinkowitz and what Missouri's doing. Maybe because South Carolina comes after the Georgia game, and they're going to be beaten up after that game, and maybe that's a game where Shane Beamer is able to trip them up into Williams-Brice Stadium in November. It wouldn't surprise me to see him win one that he's not supposed to, and lose one that you really are shocked about on Sunday morning.
We appreciate you being here, folks. While you're here, hit the like button, share the videos out on social media, let people know that we're talking SEC football here at the Voice of College Football. Got Will Gunter on the line. The all-new early game, 107.5, the game in Columbia, South Carolina. Ed Orgeron said as little as I believe I've ever heard any coach ever say at any media days for any conference. And that's saying a lot, because I believe we could share this thought, Will, that you go into this week expecting 90% of what's said to be cut and dry, coach speak from players and coaches, but then you're just waiting for that little bit of personality, that little bit of something. But Ed Orgeron, basically, he's great, they're great, we're just going to do our best. And, and I didn't hear anything except for his two quarterbacks are championship caliber quarterbacks.
I thought it was interesting. He was asked about running the program and what he would do, and I forget the exact phrasing of the question and the exact phrasing of the answer, but it was basically Orgeron said, "I'm going to do what I believe is best," and that's the difference between a guy. Shane Beamer, we'll use him as an example. First year head coach, is kind of finding his footing in the league, and he's mentioned he is not afraid to reach out and get insight from other people on how to do this or how to do that. And what I heard from Ed Orgeron today, who is under fire, I mean, there's no doubt 5-5 at LSU doesn't cut it. He's got two new coordinators, Jake Peets, the offense coordinator. I think it was Duran. I've forgotten his name now. I talked about it all mornings. We talked a lot about LSU this morning. But you get two new coordinators in there. The Bo Pelini thing was a complete fiasco. He admitted that today. But he said, I'm going to fix it with my I forget how he phrased it, but he said, I'm going to fix it with my opinions and how I feel it should be fixed. And that to me is a guy who is now comfortable in what he is. He's won a championship. He feels comfortable making the shots and not having to ask for outside influence. And look, there's a lot going on at LSU. He was asked about that today, just about some of the sexual charges, the sexual assault charges, and some of the other things that have happened down there kind of on his watch, and that LSU's in a little bit of turmoil off the field right now, and he kind of declined that one. But Ed Orgeron is not an idiot, He knows right now that 5-5 does not cut it, and last year was a tough year for LSU. You can't lose some of the games they lost.
We'll enter the all-new early game, 107.5 The Game. Will, it is always a good time. Always great to hear from you. Always learn something about the league, the SEC. Before I let you go, is there anything that we've missed? Anything that's gone on this spring and summer since the last time we talked to you about college football that you're looking forward to in terms of August camp?
No, I continue to look forward to it all. Obviously, big picture today, Greg Sankey meeting with the media. I think the thing we took out of that was Greg Sankey basically saying that there will be no postponed games this year. That if you can't field a roster, you don't get a second chance. It's your responsibility, whether you want to vaccinate your players or whatever you want to do, but it's your responsibility to show up on Saturdays with a roster that can compete. And if you don't do that, well, then guess what? You're going to have to forfeit the game. There's not going to be any redos in December. So I thought that was kind of interesting today from Greg Sankey. He kind of hinted on the name, image, likeness. Certainly that's changing and evolving college football. Maybe not for the better. Maybe it'll all work out. I think that's going to be something that just because you see two guys for Texas Ags, the two Texas A&M players that were paid $10,000 to do an interview, I don't know if that's the norm yet. We don't know what the norm is just yet when it comes to name, image, likeness, and so you've got that. Obviously, Mark, I could spend an hour with you on the college football playoff. The thought that we're going to expand to 12 teams put me in the group that initially I disliked it. I have grown up here in Columbia. I love college football. I love the pageantry. I love the traditions. I love the fact that the regular season means something. I think that's awesome. But what I always thought was, well, if you expand, you water down the regular season. I don't believe that anymore. We're seeing teams go out and schedule better games. You look at Georgia's like 2030, 2031 schedule, and in 1 year, Georgia's going to play something like Texas, Florida State, and I think Clemson or somebody else ridiculous. I don't have it right in front of me, plus Georgia Tech as their non-conference games. You see some of these big-time games being lined up here over the next 15 or 20 years. And I think that's great for the sport. And so a lot has obviously happened. We're counting down the days, and we'll get around to really being able to break down X's and O's and first games there in about 50 days. But it's neat and it's fun to be able to have this conversation today, as opposed to, well, what should we do? What should we play this year? And should there be rules? And, it's a lot better this year. And I'm excited to see everybody get back into the stadium and, again, see the pageantry tradition that is college football.
Love the conversation, Will. Appreciate you stopping by, man.
Anytime, buddy. Glad to do it.